Welcome to the Rustic Pathways Safety Webinar. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Chris Stockich, and I'm the CEO and Chairman of the Board of Rustic Pathways. And also on the line with us tonight is Dave Dennis, who is the Director of Safety and Risk Management for Rustic Pathways. Before we get started, I do want to let everybody know that Dave and I are both parents as well. We both have children. I have 3 sons, and Dave has 2 children. And so tonight we're going to be talking with you from a professional perspective in our area of expertise working in this field. But I just want you to know that from a personal perspective, we are parents. We understand just how important your sons and daughters are to you. And to be honest, we love the fact that you're interested in joining the call tonight, learning more about our approach to safety and risk management, and our, the subset of parents that are actually digging into this subject. Tonight we are going to first talk through Rustic Pathways' approach to safety and risk management. Dave Dennis will be leading us through that chunk of the call. Should be about a 15-minute segment. I'm then going to talk about the overall risks and rewards while traveling with Rustic Pathways to provide the overarching bigger perspective of what you may be stepping into this year. And then most importantly, we're going to be providing a question and answer sort of town hall discussion at the end of this call. And historically within our safety webinars, that is one of the best sections of the call when parents are really bringing forward their questions. Please know that if you're thinking it, other people are thinking it as well, and don't be afraid to ask anything during that point of the call. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Dennis, our Director in Safety and Risk Management, so he can take you through Rustic Pathways' approach to safety.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Dave Dennis. It's great talking with you this evening. As Chris had mentioned, I do have 2 children. I have a 12-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. This summer is going to be my daughter's 3rd time traveling with Rustic Pathways. In fact, this weekend we were just finalizing her enrollment and getting her secured up for her trip to Thailand this summer. Great opportunity, but the reason I'm highlighting that is I really want to reinforce the fact that everything that I talk about, every way that I approach risk and safety at Rustic Pathways is through the lens and led by me as a father and as a parent. So just to reiterate what Chris had said, I think it's just so important and so fantastic that you're joining today just to hear what we have to talk about and learn what we can do together to make sure your child is traveling safely with Rustic this summer. So everything we do with Rustic from a risk and safety standpoint is tiered and it's collaborative. And it's tiered because every little detail needs to be addressed on a Rustic Pathways program. That's all the way from Chris's level as CEO all the way down to our program leaders as well. So we have tiers built in for the larger perspective of what risk and safety looks like. And everything is also collaborative, meaning everything we do on the ground is collaborative with what we do at the country level, feeding up to the global level, and again, all the way up to Chris's level as well. So tiered and collaborative are terms you're going to hear me speak a lot about as we roll through this presentation. So let me run through what we do at the global level first. So this is obviously where I spend a lot of my time monitoring what's going around on the globe. What are the travel warnings? What's the safety security environment look like from a global perspective? And I don't try to do this by myself. I rely on multiple resources, myself and my team. Every morning we start our day, we read all the travel updates that we get. We dive into different State Department websites and rely on our resources to find out, again, what is happening around the world. So who do we use as our resources? First off, we use the US State Department, but we also look at the United Kingdom, the UK State Department, and Australian State Department. And I think it's really important to understand the perspective and why we do that as well. The State Department, no matter where geographically you're located, is a great resource because they are identifying what's happening, what's evolving from a traveler safety standpoint for residents of those countries. The reason I feel it's important to get the UK and Australian perspective as well is sometimes travel warnings are very specific to what's happening for Americans, or some of the information that we're seeing here in the US is not represented from a global standpoint. So again, understanding geographically what state departments are saying, gives us a really good balance of what traveler warnings might look like. I also rely on OSAC, which is the Overseas Security Advisory Council, and this is a collaboration between privately owned businesses that have international and again the State Department, and it really homes in on business travel standpoint, again focusing on the safety and security of international travel. When we start looking at the medical standpoint, so this could be in researching, you know, Ebola or Zika, or finding out how geographically, regionally, those medical illnesses or scenarios are taking place, we really refer to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and World Health Organization, because they have their fingers on the pulse, and they're able to tell us what is evolving, what can we do as an organization to help prepare ourselves, and then we enact our own education and action items based on that feedback. Another organization you're going to hear me talk a lot about tonight is HX Global, and in a nutshell, HX Global is one of the leading providers of safety, security, medical, and emergency evacuation services on a global platform. There's a few organizations that are very, very skilled at this, HX Global being one of them, and that's who we partner with, and every member, every traveler on a Rustic Pathways program has access to HX Global services. Again, I'll dive a little more deeply into that as we go on. And the final aspect, as far as the seeking and the acquisition of information, is I'm a member of several advisory boards, and I have a pretty extensive networking group with other global organizations in the same industry, and we talk frequently about what they're seeing, what are their local teams seeing, and how can we kind of filter that and make relevance out of the information that we're getting. So we'll now move over to the country level and how this works, moving from a global to a country level. First thing I want to point out is Rustic Pathways owns all of our operations locally. And what that means is when a group goes to Thailand, for example, Rustic Pathways has ownership of the business in Thailand. I think that's really important for everybody to understand, because some organizations in the travel industry do what's called white labeling. So for example, Rustic Pathways would just outsource to a company that they don't really have a relationship with in country. They say sell our trip, run our trip, and then it moves onward as well. The problem with that is not only is the mission, vision, and value standpoint lost when you have that disconnect, but also the professional development, the policies, the structures are not as fluid, and they're not ingrained with these other organizations. So having that ownership of the local operations is just super, super important, and I needed to home in on that. The way we structure our country teams is in every country we have a country director, and think of this as like the general manager of the country. Supported by supporting the country director is the country manager. Again, exactly what the title represents. It's just a manager to help support the director. We have program managers, and each program manager focuses on one trip or a series of programs that we operate, and they are located geographically around the area of where those programs are operating. And they are a really valuable resource for the program leaders and the delivery of the programs on the ground. And the most relevant for you and for your children are our program leaders. And these are our expertly skilled and trained representatives, the deliverers of the program. Program leaders are really the biggest thing that Rustic Pathways can invest in, and the ones that your students, your children will be coming back and talking about for days. So there's the structure of how we manage and operate our programs in country. Getting back to the information resource, so I gather everything on the global level, and I need to validate what that looks like on the ground. So I will connect with our country teams, and again, it can go through all ranks of that management structure that I explained. But any information that we get, especially in relation to travel warnings or heightened security, our team will actually go to the embassies there in their geographical area. And we have great relationships with the embassies. Our country team will actually go there and talk about the travel warnings. They'll review our itineraries. What can we do? What extra steps can we do to make sure our students are safe when we travel? So building and supporting and maintaining those embassy relationships are super important for us. We also, because we own and operate in these countries, a majority of our staff in every country are residents of where they're working. They have families and friends, and they've, relationships built. Their whole lifestyle is built around this. So they're going to have a great idea of what the local security looks like and how it represents how they feel, again, from the information that we're seeing, and how do they see it landing on the ground. And then finally, we have our resource of vendors. Our vendors, again, are those service providers that we have that could be transportation, maybe accommodations, even activity suppliers. These are our extended network, and we will talk to them about same thing, the information that we've received. They are invaluable because not only do they work with Rustic Pathways, but they also work with people outside of Rustic Pathways spheres, if you will. Normal travelers, they're able to have conversations and get a good sense of what other travelers are seeing and hearing and feeling as well. So the compilation of the embassies, our management structure, our local residents, and our vendors really give us a great filter and tool to validate the information we're hearing at a global level and seeing how that impacts anything on the ground, and if anything needs to have make adjustments or any of that. So then that leads us to the actual program delivery and how our programs are being run. So first, let me talk about our program leaders and who this pool of great people are. We have two types of leaders. We have international leaders. You could think of those as like Americans, you know, that are going somewhere else overseas to work in a seasonal capacity. And then we also have our local guides. Again, these are the ones that live and reside in the areas where we travel. And this is a fantastic balance. Our international program leaders are able to focus on group dynamics. They can focus on any, you know, dietary issue, mental health issue, really train on what that dynamic looks like for the individual travelers. And then our local teams are very focused on the delivery of the program, the logistical aspect, the cultural immersion, really getting and ingraining ourselves in with that cultural experience that we're looking to provide. All of our international program leaders are a minimum age of 23 years old. We always staff male and female on every program. So again, we realize that we're dealing with teenagers here, and we're very specific to intentionally place like genders, you know, as our student dynamic and group dynamic looks like. From a hiring and training standpoint, with our guides, we always do background checks. On our international program leaders, you know, we're able to do criminal background checks, sex offender background checks, employment checks, all of these, you know, the normal hiring procedures that we have. In countries, that does vary a little bit, but we're still performing comprehensive checks to validate and check resources and references for our local staff as well. From a training component, we have a combination of online and e-learning training in combination with in-country training. And what I mean by that is, let's say we hire a seasonal program leader. Before they even come into Rustic Pathways, we assign them a series of learning modules that's going to give them the foundation of our systems, our processes, our expectations of what it looks like to be an employee of Rustic in their select capacity. Once they then fly in, they have to pass all those module training and education. And then once they arrive in country, we really focus on the country training, the delivery of programs, who our vendors are, and building those relationships with the local team and the international team together. It's been very, very successful. It's a great model for training and combining the local and international resources together. We provide ongoing training on a regular basis. This could be through case studies, it could be through e-learning platforms, or just general professional development skills, development of our curriculums. You know, we're really strong supporters of education, obviously, and that doesn't stop with the students. We fulfill that through all of our ranks of program leading. And then down to the medical certification standpoint. Now, a base requirement for all of our program leaders is first aid and CPR, and that's standard in the industry. We hire intentionally for a lot of our seasonal staff to have advanced medical training. Those could be EMTs, it could be wilderness first aid, you know, anything along those gamut. But we really invest in our full-time program leading staff. And what we do is all of our program leading staff, we pay for them to get wilderness first responder certified. What that means is when we're out in a remote location, if something is to happen, our staff are trained and know how to use their medical kit to stabilize and treat the immediate urgent situation while we're calling for professional help. And again, we support and invest in our full-time program leaders at this level of training because it's very important to us. Put woofer, excuse me, I'm stumbling. We put woofer, our wilderness first responder guides, on programs at a bare minimum under 2 criteria. The first being anytime we have a type 1 diabetic on a program, we will put a woofer certified program leader on that program. And then whenever we have a program that has any destination that's 2 hours or more away from definitive medical care, we will, again, staff with a woofer certified program leader there. Getting back to the overall program, we never exceed a 1-to-7 ratio, so that is a 1 program leader to 7 students. And we have trip packets. So in order to prepare our program leaders for their program itself, we give them packets of information. And of course, this contains the itineraries that they need, the information on the students that we require and we gather, the medical forms and whatnot. But we also have program risk management plans for every individual program. What's contained in the risk management plans are every known and anticipated risk that we could foresee for any type of activity that we are fulfilling on the program. We have, again, the itinerary that we include, emergency contact lists, steps in case any incident or hazard was to come across. What are those steps that we're looking at taking? Again, we have emergency lists, all embassies included, and then evacuation plans for the overall group program as well, if we ever needed to enact those. And then a final piece of our program delivery is what we do with our vendors. So again, you'll remember that these are our transportation, our hotel, and our activity providers. We go deep into these businesses and we perform business assessments on them. We view these vendors as direct extensions of who Rustic Pathways are because they are also delivering parts of the program. And these parts of the programs are very specific to like whitewater rafting or, you know, hiking a certain route or something like that. These are specialists for those type of activities. They have the skills, they have the skill sets. We don't try to be all things to all people. So when we come across those types of activities on programs, that's what we're outsourcing to local experts. So what do we do from a business assessment standpoint? We look at all their business licensing and permitting, of course. We also dive into their hiring and training and performance monitoring practices for all of their staff that would interact with our students. We also look at maintenance for all equipment that might be provided or any vehicles that might be used. Again, anything that the students are touching, sitting in, feeling, whatever, we are looking deeply into all aspects of what those look like, part of the business. We dive into the risk management plans, we look at their emergency response planning, and then see where we can fit in to help support and collaborate with these vendors if there's ever a situation that goes on. We do this on an annual basis. We do the formal documentation every couple of years, but we're certainly diving in and having these conversations every year. To support the vendor vetting that we do, we also have a list of guidelines that we label activity standards. So this would be something like if we're going to do a bike riding tour in Thailand, using that example again, what do our program leaders need to be paying attention to? Well, certainly every student needs to have an appropriately sized helmet. They need to know how to work the bike and give a run through and, you know, how to ride a bike in this specific environment that we have. Everybody needs to, but we always need a lead and a sweep. We always need to ride in lines. You know, those simple guidelines that our program leaders can help verify the business assessment that we do with our vendors, but also to ensure that the hands-on and the real tactical aspects of safety are then being delivered on the ground. So we have these standards that complement the vendor vetting, again, really securing, if you will, all aspects of our program delivery. So let's look at emergency response and what that might look like if anything that was to happen on a program. So first off, we have a color coding system, and these really identify the severities of type of incidents that we come across. They're very simple stoplight analogy: green, yellow, red. Green being very minor, low-lying issues. Yellow is obviously something more escalated, and then red would be life-threatening or very severe incidents. In country, every country has a response platform and process. Typically, and in short, just thinking that it goes from program leader up to their program manager, all the way up to the country director, or even up to myself. But if there's anything that escalates on a larger scale, we have a full crisis response team and a corporate emergency management plan. The crisis response team is developed and created by all executives, VPs, and select directors in the company. All of us have select roles and action response plans and items, checklist of items, if anything was to come up on that level. We also have an emergency management plan, as I listed. This is updated sporadically throughout the year. We run exercises on it. So we spend a lot of time working with country teams with the local issues, and what does that process look like for anything escalating? We also have medical and mental health directors on staff. What this means is we contract with reputable, industry-leading professionals in their field from mental health and wilderness medicine in particular, and they are available to us whenever we need them on a call. So this could be a challenging situation. We just need to make sure we're acting in the right manner, or maybe we're asking for their insight. And we also have HX Global, and I mentioned earlier, they are a great resource both as you're preparing for a program and as something may escalate or take place on a program. Whenever a student gets ill on a program, for example, and we have thresholds, so let's just say 24 hours, somebody's still not feeling well, maybe they're still having diarrhea, something like that, typically the lower lying issues that we commonly see, that any traveler is going to see. We contact HX Global, and they're really good of monitoring the situation and checking in with updates. If we need to go to a hospital or seek professional attention, they're going to find us the appropriate hospital, find us the appropriate doctor, and actually make an appointment and even any logistical arrangements for transport that we need. This allows us to focus on the care and the treatment of the student while these other aspects are going on. Very fluid, very worthwhile process. So I explained our risk management, I talked about our emergency response, so let's talk about for a minute what you can do as parents to help your child prepare for travel when we look at international travel. So first off, do your research. You can feel confident that Rustic Pathways, we're doing everything, like I said, I live and breathe risk management and safety, not only for my daughter, but everyone else. But certainly utilizing these same resources, the State Department, HX Global, the CDC, doing your own research and finding out what it is and where you are sending your son or daughter will go a very long way. Again, we want to be collaborative in this effort. Talk to your doctors, talk to your therapists. For anybody who is, we understand at Rustic that every student is an individual and everybody takes their own pathway to adulthood. And we need to be clear and work together with that. So not only are you talking to your doctors and potentially any therapists, but as you're filling out the medical information and the history of what your son or daughter might look like, we need more honesty, or as much honesty and transparency as possible. Because what we do with this information, first off, we have a dedicated team that looks at every single form that comes in. And what that team does is they will actually connect with you for anything that is a heightened issue or anything that might be concerning. We will gather more information from you and then relay that directly to those that are delivering the program. So we can make adjustments to dietary issues, allergies, anything under the gamut like that. So as you're filling out these enrollment forms, as you're preparing for travel, lean on us as a great resource, but also look outside of Rustic Pathways and find out for yourself. And again, bring this to the table and bring these conversations to us. The more we're working collaboratively together, the better, again, safety, security for your son or daughter. Chris, I think that's all I had. I'll pass this back to you.
All right, great, Dave. Thank you very much. Very, very informative. I'm just going to take 5 to 6 quick minutes. I just want to talk with all of you about the reality of risk and of the rewards traveling with Rustic Pathways, and as you send your sons and daughters out there in the world to travel internationally, period. So if you look at the top risks of international travel, if you were a student between the years of 2006 and 2016, looking at the last decade, in order of the highest risks that students face, number 1 is traffic accidents, number 2 is homicide, number 3 is suicide, and number 4 is drowning. These are the risks that we're looking at. We look at tiered risks for all of our students traveling to all the different countries where we travel, and the risks are typically ranked according to 1, the time exposed to the risk, 2, the probability of a risk actually happening, and 3, the severity of the consequence if that risk were to happen. So as you've heard, we have extensive procedures in place to mitigate these risks. We have the network and the connections to properly manage risks if and when they occur. And so we are prepared and are very knowledgeable about the real risks that students do face while they're traveling. As parents, and this is snapping back to Dave and I being parents, being in our own home, watching the TV, reading the news. Each summer before we're heading out into the world with students, there are risks that pop up, and those can range anywhere from the Zika virus to the bird flu virus to the SARS virus to increased terrorism to a military coup. And just realize a lot of the time what you're seeing in the media are not the real risks we face on the ground. And I only mention this to parents so that you can be informed about the real risks your son and daughter faces. And at any time, you're welcome to contact me. You're welcome to contact Dave. We're more than happy to talk parents through the real risks that are out there in the world and how to prevent them from happening, how you can get involved as parents versus the media effect of being worried about things that typically will not make the top 5 or the top 10 list of real risks that your sons and daughters face. We are here as a resource. Please feel free to do your homework. Feel free to engage with us to dive into the risks that your son or daughter would specifically face in the different countries where we travel. The second thing I want to share is just balancing that with the top rewards of traveling with Rustic Pathways. And as parents, you have a variety of reasons that you're likely enrolling your son or daughter in a trip with us. But after working here for 15 years, I just want to share the student outcomes that we see time and time and time again, and the way in which we're positioning Rustic Pathways to be a complement to what your sons and daughters are learning in the classroom. And the first one is just looking at the world in the year 2017. As you all know, we are far more interconnected as a world than we've ever been before. And as an example, here at Rustic Pathways, we have 287 employees globally that are full-time employees. Those employees are working across 17 states and 22 countries. And we're conducting our business over video Skype every single day for free. We are connected across time zones and across languages around the world. And this isn't just a snapshot of Rustic Pathways. The world is clearly heading in a direction that will continue to be more and more globalized. And in the years 2025, 2030, 2035, most leaders in business, education, healthcare, government, they will all be able to understand and investigate how problems occur, what type of opportunities are popping up, what type of challenges there are, and they'll be able to create solutions and implement those across country borders in languages, in religions, and cultures. And this is a critical skill set, in my personal opinion, for students who are in high school now. It will continue to be more and more important as we get down the road. The second thing is our programs provide a tremendous amount of perspective and self-awareness for students. We're in the business of challenging students' assumptions, and we naturally plug them into environments where there's different food, there's different music, there's a different language being spoken, there's different customs rolling out right in front of their eyes. And it helps students build that bigger picture of how the world works and how they can plug into that. And it helps define for themselves who they are and what types of opportunities are right at their fingertips. One of the most common things we hear from students when they return home is that program changed my life. And one of the most common things we hear from parents is just how grateful their sons and daughters return. The third thing is that our programs very much help students identify their passion and their purpose and help get them on the track to head in the direction they want to. And as parents, if you're on this call, you've already likely invested a lot of money in your sons and daughters, potentially a lot of money in their high school, certainly a lot of money in their college. And no matter who you talk to, traveling dramatically increases the return on investment because of the perspective and self-awareness, and because it helps students recognize what they're passionate about and how to zone in on that. And as an industry, we hear countless stories of how students who have studied abroad their junior year of college have gained these types of skill sets. And then senior year, and boom, they're out in the world. I was one of those students. I studied abroad my junior year when I was at Harvard University. I returned for my senior year, and all I was thinking about was getting through 2 more semesters because now I knew what I wanted to do in the world. My opinion, my suggestion, the way I will support my own children is to provide that experience to them earlier on so that the freshman year, sophomore year, junior year of high school, and certainly college is informed by that perspective shifting. And it is, you could take the high school years and college years and better focus them on something that students are passionate about or at least interested in. The last thing I'll mention, this one is a little more into the weeds as far as our programs and the benefits students have. We've done a lot of testing around non-cognitive skill set development on our programs. In most schools, almost every school that you'll come across, the academic model is based on learning information, processing that information, and then putting that information back in a new format on paper or through a computer or through some type of presentation. And those are developing cognitive skill sets. Non-cognitive skill sets are all the other pieces. And if you study what's going on in the world out there, the top 500 companies globally are pointing to students who are successful in their company, or young adults or adults who are successful in their company, have mastered skill sets like grit and independence and humility and sense of wonderment. And it's not the information that they're taking from college, but it's these non-cognitive skill sets that come up time and time again and can be used across industries, across companies, and taken from job to job. For our programs, we've developed a student impact tool through some PhD students so that we could actually learn more about what types of non-cognitive skill sets are being gained, how they're gained, when they're gained, and then specifically zoom in the moments within programs and how that's happening. And so behind the scenes, this isn't something we sort of market to students or market to parents, but it is something we measure in the background. How big of a leap are students making during our programs? How do we continue to fine-tune our programs to help them develop skill sets like humility, grit, independence, sense of wonderment? We've seen some amazing results. On a whole different webinar, we share this information in greater depth. If anyone wants to reach out to me after the call, I'd be happy to connect you with our whole education team and how all this stuff works. But the overarching picture here is, as parents, we definitely want you to be looking at the real risks of traveling, be looking at the real rewards of traveling, ensuring that you have the whole picture and the statistical information as you enter into this moment of choice and how you want to guide your son or daughter down their life path. Last thing I will share, and then we'll move to the Q&A, is that we have what's called the Rustic Pathways No Anxiety Policy. Very simple concept. We want parents to feel comfortable, feel confident, and feel excited when they send their sons and daughters with us. And there are times where, 2 weeks before or 1 week before, or heck, the day before the trip, parents may be getting nervous or the student may be getting very nervous. We want you to know we have a no anxiety policy. If for any reason you want to cancel your trip up until the day before the trip, we can escrow the ground fees for up to 2 years and hold those funds until your son or daughter is ready to travel, or you could travel as a family and we'll apply it to a family program. We'll give you a certificate so you can see what that money is. As a heads up, you would likely lose the international airfare. That is way out of our control in being able to manage. So United Airlines, Singapore Airlines, they will take your money. But for the program, for the ground costs of the actual program, we will escrow those for up to 2 years until, as a family, you're ready for the program. So that wraps up the main points that Dave and I have for you all tonight. You'll see that within the the tools that should be in front of you, you can type in questions into the question bar. I'll read off some of these questions, and I'll likely handball them over to Dave Dennis to answer. I may be adding to some of the answers. So let's see what we get here. I got one question coming in. Okay. The first question is, my daughter is going to be 14 this coming May and wants to travel with you this summer to the Rice Fields Base Camp program. Can you provide some tips on how I know if she's ready from a maturity standpoint? Dave, do you want to start on the answers to these and I can elaborate?
Yeah, sure. Start off with the doozy. I think it's great. So just speaking from my own personal experience with my daughter, I was not as focused whether or not she was able to make independent decisions, from a world travel standpoint, if you will. What I mean by that is, does she know what international travel looks like? Does she know how to exchange all of her money? Does she have all the answers and is able to, interject with locals in an appropriate way? I didn't have the answers to any of those questions, but what I did know is I felt that she was able to take care of herself in the sense that she knew when she was tired to get some sleep. She knew when she's hungry and thirsty. She knows what type of medications she needs to take and when. And I think that goes back to a health and safety and security standpoint. Is she able to maintain that level of self-care? The second is, how does she interact with other kids, whether they're in her own social groups or maybe others, a little older? And I'm thinking along the terms of like the program leader. So again, is my daughter going to have the capacity to reach out to somebody that is a local resource there and somebody that can actually take action to help regardless of whatever the scenario is? Or is she still in a mindset where, I'm timid, I'm shy, I don't know how to ask for help? I think that's a moving target for everybody. I certainly know for my daughter, it was that standpoint. So I don't really have a succinct and easy answer, and I would love to pick up this conversation and really dive into maybe my personal experience as well. But one thing I can say is I felt good once I knew my daughter was in the care of Rustic staff. I knew that she was going to be looked after and cared after. To be quite honest, the most anxiety that I have whenever my daughter would travel when she was younger is what that transportation looked like and getting her from my home over to where she's meeting the Rustic Pathways staff. And we do have mechanisms in place with that. So let me just continue on this for just a brief moment because we did have another follow-up question come in. So what does travel look like in transport days with Rustic Pathways? So we have 5 departure gateway airports, if you will. Just think of them. So it's JFK, Newark, Miami, Houston, and LAX, Los Angeles. Once your child gets into one of those 5 locations, depending on where they're going on a program, they're going to meet up with Rustic Pathways personnel. What that looks like is we always have 2 airport coordinators in every one of those 5 airports or gateway locations. Those airport coordinators spend all day just collecting students, getting them to their traveling group. So A group will go to Thailand, A group will go to Australia. The airport coordinators are going to help locate everybody and get them together. We always meet at the ticket counter. It's very easy. That's simple. Our flight leaders accompany the group flights from one of these gateway departure airports into country. They will never be left alone. So it depends on what the ratios are and the number of flight leaders, but we have all of our students in the welcome package your child will get before they travel. There's going to be 2 critical things in there. There's a lot of nice stuff that talks about the program and some insurance components or whatever, but there's a Rustic Pathways t-shirt, and we want all of our kids to wear these t-shirts both on their flight into country and their flight back home. Obviously, the reasons these are brightly colored shirts, they're very fun. Kids wear them forever after the program anyway, but it's an easy identifier of what students are within our group. The other thing that we have, which is new this year and I'm excited about, is we're creating wristbands. These are going to be like the foundation type of wristbands that you will normally see that are given out. On the outside, it's going to say Rustic Pathways, but on the inside of that is going to be our emergency phone number. I failed to mention it earlier, but we do have a 24-hour 365-day emergency phone that everybody has access to. On those wristbands is going to be that number. If they ever get separated from their traveling group, there's the number. We take the ease out of that, or the complication out of that as well. So they would travel as a group from the gateway. Once they arrive into country, as soon as they clear customs and immigration, our Rustic Pathways staff is going to be right there. It's their program leaders. They scoop them up, and then they start the adventure and their journey. So again, very well maintained and supervised, traveling as a group from the departure city onward.
Great. Dave, we have a few questions coming in.
Yeah.
One was, can you repeat the gateway airports again?
Yes, so it's JFK, it's Newark, Miami, Houston, and Los Angeles, LAX.
Yep. I'll answer this next one. It is, what is the average age of students who travel with Rustic Pathways? Are they generally closer to 14 or 18? The programs actually start at 13, and it would pretty much be a bell curve if you graphed it out. The majority of students are 16, with then 15 and 17 falling outside of that, with 14 and 18 falling outside of that. And it depends on countries. Younger students tend to go more towards destinations closer to home, like Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, whereas our programs in Africa, Morocco, and in Tanzania, or in Southeast Asia tend to be a bit for older students. Another question here was, someone said that they're looking at our program compared with another one that has some school credit for the daughter. What makes our program different than others? Just as a comment to this mom, we will show our own contact information is the next slide. Actually, I'll do that right now. Feel free to write down our email address, write down our phone number. You can contact us anytime. It would be easier for me to specifically answer this question if I knew what organization you were talking about, just because the format of the program could be dramatically different. But within our field, if you're looking at an apples-to-apples comparison with Rustic Pathways or a lot of the other international travel providers, I would come back. There's about 3 or 4 things. One of the biggest is, as Dave Dennis said, we are a completely vertically integrated company. So in each country where we operate, we have a local company, we have full-time local staff, we have our own vehicles, we have our own offices. And the key there is that our vision as a company and our values of how we achieve that vision, our mission as a company, translates straight through. And if we get some feedback from week 1 of a program that this one variable, they wanted a different type of food, or the hotel isn't as good as it used to be, we can change that and implement it immediately. Most companies in our field are sales and marketing companies, and then they outsource the operation of the program to a local ground provider that takes the people around the country. A company like Rustic Pathways would add 1 or 2 staff to that program to create some fluidity. But the reality is a lot of those programs aren't run by the companies that are selling you the programs. Varies per company, varies per program content. Offering credit on programs is a whole web to detangle in itself. Yeah, feel free to write down my information, and I'd be happy to follow up. Dave, I got another one for you, which is, we talked a lot about international trips, which have a complicated safety plan. But what's in place for trips within the U.S.? This parent's daughter is going to the Refugee Youth Project in Baltimore.
Okay. Obviously we're benefited by having a great response structure here inherently in the U.S., but I think the point, nothing has changed from the way we would elevate a situation. It would still go through the ranks of our country management team. It would still escalate to myself. Again, very situation dependent. I think the piece that, again, we would rely on first responders, ambulance, police, whatever that situation might look like, again, and then taking in the considerations for what our remote access looks like and the training of our guides. So all of that remains in place. I really feel like the added content around communications with family and what would that look like. So we would never allow a student or bring a student to a hospital or a clinic that is any situation that is not an emergent, a duress, a life-threatening situation. All other medical care, visits to clinics, hospitals, we're going to be reaching out to parents. We're never going to leave you in the dark. If there's a situation where your son or daughter is reaching out to you and saying, hey, I've been sick for a couple of days, nobody seems to be caring or checking on me or something along those terms, I'm not a gambling man, but I would bet the house that that is not actually the case. That is one perspective of what's going on. What I would really encourage parents to do is reach out to us so we are aware of what's going on and we can provide you with great detail of what's going on the ground. But also refer to your son or daughter and ask them, hey, have you talked to your program leader? What does that look like? Are they aware of what's going on and your symptoms and whatnot? Because again, the program leaders are going to be the ones that can make a change and take action on the ground. So while I love the security blanket of mom and dad, really it's that program staff that we can redirect that energy and that activity towards. Returning back to the first question, you know, again, the structure is still in place. That's always going to remain in place. I think it's just enhanced just by the fluidity of dealing with the same time zones, what that ease of communication would look like. But there really is not going to be a drastic difference on our level of escalation and care.
Great. Looks like we have 5 more questions. The next one is I'll answer this one, Dave. My daughter is doing a trip to Australia, which leaves from LAX. We live in Boston. So would the flight leaders also help my daughter at LAX in getting from her Boston flight? And again, when it is time to catch her flight home from LAX to Boston. Short answer is yes. The way this works is that you will take your daughter to the airport in Boston. You'll see her through security. We are tracking every student on every flight as they're moving across the country to the gateway cities. In the summertime, there's weather. There are students who forget passports. There are all kinds of things that pop up. We deal with it every single week. In the LAX airport, we have 2 different airport coordinators that are working outside of security. And so they are receiving students that are showing up with their parents in cars. And then they're also talking with our travel team that's tracking these flights coming in. So they know there's a flight coming in from Boston that is now 38 minutes between when it arrives and when this other flight is leaving. They know what is going on at all times. They have the phone numbers of the parents and typically the students. Our flight coordinator in LAX specifically will text students days before the trip to let them know they have tight connections and exactly how to get through the airport. Your daughter would get off the plane, go grab the bags and baggage claim and transfer to the international terminal and at LAX, check in at the international terminal, go through security, and be off on her way. Our flight coordinators would be outside of security checking off students as they come to check into this new flight. If students are slow and they know the flight has landed yet the student hasn't showed up with their bag, again, they're contacting the parent, they're contacting the student, they're trying to expedite the situation. And then once through security, we have different staff that are the flight leaders that are on the flight with the students. And so they are also checking off students as they arrive at security. We've been doing this for 33 years. You know, we've never lost a student. We track this stuff very, very closely and have the systems in place to make sure that the travel day goes as smoothly as possible. Dave, question for you. Next one is how often will my child be able to contact home?
Great. So let me start off by saying, well, the short answer, we always send safe arrival emails. So once the group arrives, again, they're there with the flight leader, they meet our country team, you will have an email that says your son or daughter arrived safely, we're so excited, blah, blah, blah. Then you know they're safe and secure. Our average communication on programs is once per week while the program is taking place. So if it's a 7-day trip, you'll probably get one right in the middle, and then they'll come home. I mean, that's a short trip, obviously. 14-day trip, you guys can all do the math. We like to recommend that students don't spend a lot of time on their phone. Certainly let them bring it. I think on travel days, cell phones are just a great thing that we've all become reliant on as parents, that our kids have these phones. But once they get into country, we really make an intentional effort to have our kids disconnect. This is not to limit the communication to parents, but it's to get them engaged in what the environment is, the members of the group, I think we all, as parents, can share stories about, kids being head down in the family room. We're all trying to have family time. We all get that idea. So while on program, if kids ever needed to get a hold of their parents, we are never going to roadblock that. In fact, if a student happens to be deteriorating for whatever reason, they may be homesick, something may have triggered an anxiety, and we're all aware of that, we're going to help facilitate a phone call, again, in the safety and the best interest of the student and parents if parents want to communicate with their kids. But the idea is, let's make sure they're safe in country. We have a standard process of communication, and then let's allow our kids to disconnect and have this moment in time to really live in the moment to create the experience that you are expecting as parents. And again, if you ever need to reach out to your son or daughter, we have systems in place. We have emergency sat phones. We have all this stuff. So that would not be a cumbersome process.
All right, 2 more quick ones, Dave. One is regarding vaccinations. How are we sure which vaccinations to get?
Oops, there we go. Can you hear me? I thought I went on mute for a second.
Yep.
Yeah, so with vaccinations, we as an organization are not legally able to recommend what vaccination somebody gets, and we don't have a requirement. The only required vaccinations would be in relation to entry visa. So for example, trips going out to Tanzania must have their students must have proof of a yellow fever vaccination. That's not a Rustic Pathways rules. That's just part of the custom standpoint. We also recognize that individuals have religious beliefs, and vaccinations are a personal decision. So we recommend, again, HX Global is a great resource, and their website, which everyone will have access to, talk about recommended and then optional vaccinations per country, per region of where you may be traveling. So does the CDC and the World Health Organization. And then I would recommend taking that information, your trip itinerary, where you're going, talk to your general practitioner, talk to your travel doctor, and see what fits for you as an individual. And then if you have remaining questions or something, we can certainly be in contact with our medical director, again, redirect you to HX Global, something like that.
Okay, great. Last question so far for the night. It's about travel insurance and wondering whether their domestic insurance will cover them internationally.
Right. So does domestic insurance cover students internationally? So that's a moving target, and that's very dependent on who your carrier is and what your domestic coverage looks like. But it is definitely an important conversation to have. So the question should be, well, my son or daughter, again, traveling to whatever country, we'll say Thailand, is my coverage good for overseas medical costs? Most of the time, just in my 22 years in the industry, I've seen that domestic coverage does not necessarily cover internationally, but that's something that as a family you would want to check into. Now there's a couple options, and I just want to be clear. So Rustic Pathways, we have a provider under the name of TripMate that we recommend. We're not obligated, nobody's obligated to buy any of insurance through TripMate. The benefit of TripMate is that we've walked through all of our program itineraries, and they can guarantee coverage for every activity in every region that we have, that their coverage is worthwhile. Travel insurance also, not only does it cover international medical expense, but travel insurance will also cover lost, baggage, lost personal belongings. If there's a flight delay, something along these other, God forbid, any personal items are stolen from your son or daughter while they're traveling, that travel insurance component is going to fill in those gaps. So you're not out of pocket personally. How that normally works would be if for a medical case, for example, they would pay, your son or daughter could pay for the medical expense up front if it's a clinic visit, for example. They would be given paperwork, and your son or daughter would bring that paperwork home and then submit a reimbursement to whatever travel insurance or insurance provider that you would have, standard process. I also want to clarify when HX Global emergency evacuation coverage starts and when it ends, because I just want to be clear that HX is not travel medical insurance. They are helping on the medical and safety side pre-trip, pre-travel information. And then once on a program, all the monitoring they would do and setting appointments, that's all done free from the membership. If we ever had a situation where we had to call urgent evacuation out And HX Global, we give them the scenario of what the situation looks like, and they say, we think you need to evac, we're sending an ambulance, we're sending a helicopter, something along those lines. As soon as the helicopter or ambulance is deployed from the facility, all the way with the medical doctors and everybody on board, they pick up our staff member and your student and bring them to whatever facility they're going. All of that transport and that arrangement is covered through HX Global. The moment your son or daughter sets foot in the hospital locally, that's when travel medical insurance would take place. So I just want to be clear that HX Global doesn't cover the care once in the hospital, but everything up to that point would be covered.
All right, three more questions popped in.
Good.
One is, and you might be able to answer this quickly based on what you just said, but regarding insurance, should we secure a separate health plan policy for emergency evacuation?
No. Nope.
Yep.
You have that through HX Global.
Okay. This is a travel coordination question. How can we coordinate a return trip with others to New York City? So obviously, I mean, in all of our gateway cities, we have multiple students coming from New York and coming from Miami and coming from Chicago. How can they coordinate with the other students?
That is a good question, and I'm just going to be honest. I think that would probably be better addressed through a personal travel advisor or somebody knowing those specifics. So I would like to table that question for follow-up.
Yeah. I was going to pretty much do the same thing, Dave.
Okay.
What I will tell parents is we have to be extremely careful. We're dealing with minors. We do not give out students' information. We do not give out parents' information. A lot of times, students will call and say, "Hey, is Julia Jones on this trip?" You know, we can't tell that girl that Julia Jones is on the trip. We say you must contact Julia Jones to find out. We very much protect people's information. So you can follow up with this question in an email to either Dave or me. We'll connect you with the travel team. What I believe they do, I believe they can tell you which segments we have students on. So like generally speaking, there's a student on United Flight 516 departing Boston at 6 p.m. or departing New York. So I believe we can give you specific flights that students are on, but not give you the information of those students. Our travel team could give you the specifics though. And the last one is, what if my child wants to stay longer?
Good. Absolutely, and we have several students who do that every single year. The way the process works, so again, it would be very specific to what your son or daughter looks like, what are they doing after the program, and we just want to be very clear with what that looks like. The way we work it is we're going to have a form. It's called a deviation from travel. It just means your son or child is going to stay in country longer. They're not going to be part of a group flight home, and that's okay as parents. So as you're enrolling, as we're building up and we're preparing for travel, you would talk to your personal travel advisor, whoever is helping you with your enrollment. Let them know your aspirations and what your son or daughter would like to do. They will provide you with a form. That form is simply going to say, I as a parent give my approval for such and such a person to pick up my son or daughter, or they will be traveling alone as a legal adult or whatever that scenario might look like. If somebody is picking them up, that same form that you would fill out as parents is in the hands of our country team, and then they would validate check ID and capture the cell phone number of the person picking up, your son or daughter, and then we would have that form completed, send it back to you. So that would be the official breaking point of your son or daughter is no longer with Rustic in the care of this person you pre-approved, and everybody's on the up and up. So that is really a clarification communication piece for us.
Yep. And then I'll give you the other side of that question, which happens all the time. What if your son or daughter wants to stay a week longer on another program? They're traveling in Thailand. They meet some friends. All the friends are now doing the island hopping trip, and your daughter wants to go. This happens all the time. And the biggest challenge with students adding additional weeks in country is finding seats on airlines during the peak of the summer. So if possible, try to figure out the whole breadth of combination of programs your son or daughter wants to do beforehand. We have it every single week in multiple countries. Students want to stay late. Sometimes we can always work it out, almost always on the ground in country. It's typically a matter of the airlines and whether you want your son or daughter to fly back with our flight leaders on the airplane with our staff and the rest of the students. Great questions. Let me see if there's any more. All right, it looks like that's the last question for us tonight, Dave. I just want to thank you all once again. It's reassuring for us as parents to know that parents are really digging into this stuff. My email address and phone number is there. Dave's email address and phone number is there. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us with more questions if you have them. Otherwise, have a fantastic Monday night, and thanks again for taking the time. Cheers.